Hello everyone and welcome back to Let's Play Megaman Battle Network Operate Star Force. In the last part, we got the second to last battle chips and then explored the Star Coliseum. And now we're here in Undernet 12 with my final folder, sort of, to take on the Superboss, who spawns here only when there's only one chip in the library you don't have, no matter which version of the game you're playing. And the way you find him, you just run around until he shows up. He's a random encounter. This means it can show up the first battle, or he might take upwards of 3 minutes. Just to save you guys some time, I'm going to jump cut to when we get to that fight in a moment, assuming I forget if I actually get this the first or second battle. Oh no, there he is! They weren't just going to adapt to classic Mega Man characters without bringing in Bass too. Are you insane? Now, Bass is notable because he actually kills me off screen, and he's a bit of a hard fight otherwise. Bass has 1500 HP, 500 boosted from the original game in Operate Star Force. He also has the life virus's LifeAura. But the only thing is, his doesn't go down every single time he attacks, only when he charges for attacks like this Buster Rake, which sends random amounts of green projectiles down rows at a time. The best way to dodge that is to pause buffer, especially here in Operate Star Force, where they by and large sped up most of his attack animations. He is a hard fight, and getting his chip, pretty hard too. 1500 HP with a replenishing life aura. The best way to go about fighting it, is, especially if you have fast gauge asterisk, is to just hope you get program advances in good timing with his charge ups. He does spawn relatively regularly, like he's not a very hard fight to run into compared to, say, the other version 3 navis. And we do only have to fight him the once, but he can be a bit of a problem. With that said, we do have one of the game's new program advances here. This is Double Mega Man, where you just do a giant rake of attacks over the enemy field for a good, what is that, 500 damage? Tasty. The 1500 HP as well is a bit easier to go through than most other characters with that high in the series of an HP count, just because BN1's battle chip damage balancing is a little bit all over the place. So you can relatively quickly scoot that down with individual attacks, just on the prospect of it being BN1. Bring some good PAs, and hopefully you'll take him down quickly enough. I'm torn in a way, though, because I feel the base fights in the later games are not only better balanced for the difficulty, but you just get better things out of them. Because the battle chip you get for beating him in this game just isn't that good to me. It's not used in any program advances. It's more or less just for multiplayer. If they had made him more worthwhile to fight, I would probably like him a lot more in this game. And that's even assuming you get the battle chip, which, okay, good, I got it. LifeAura. It's the exact same thing as his. 100 damage or less will not break it. It is a very good chip for multiplayer. But that is the last battle chip in the game. The library is now 100% and we are level 100, but there's still technically very minor things to do. Just give me a second here to make a quick jump cut. What I just did was put in a Gameshark code, and now I'm going to enter the network mode. This is where you could trade battle chips or practice in battle with real other players, assuming that you had the Nintendo Wi-Fi connection up. Oh, and I guess I should make a name. The main reason I'm in here is there are 2 battle chips that we don't have yet that were event exclusive. You would get these on the GBA game with one of them, because only one of them is in the GBA game, by taking it to an event and have them just putting it into your cartridge. Sort of like an event Pokemon. But in the Operate Star Force, it was closer to how they did things, I think, with the Nintendo channel with Star Force 3. And there is a code I'll be showing momentarily to get them both. What you want to do if you have that code, just head into the client mode right here. And select either of the top 2 options. On one of them, you'll get Rogue B. This is a Star Force crossover chip with Rogue/Bly/Burai, which was that series' Proto Man. And here we get Bass's own Bass F chip. Bass F was one of those, of course, that was also in BN1. Right on screen right now is when I should be putting the code on screen you need to get them both. So now let's go take a look at those. They're placed at numbers 180 and 181 out of the library for the max library that Mega Man Battle Network 1 ever had. And the Rogue chip is necessary for the second of the program advances that is exclusive to Operate Star Force. And it's alright. I prefer it to some of the other program advances in the game, which isn't a very long shot, I know, but still, let's go take a look at these chips. What base does is a little bit visually confusing, given its number of 200 damage. It makes it look like he's hitting the entire enemy field with his Buster Rake, and you would think that every single time he hits someone it does 200 damage. No, it's just a flat 200 across the entire thing. The animation is just there to look fancy. It is one single hit to every single one of those panels, plain and simple. And now I'm going to be heading over towards the end game to show off the Bly chip / Rogue. Rogue is noticeably more interesting. It only does 60 damage, apparently, but what it does is that it does 3 wide swords, basically, doing 60 damage, so it does 180 total. Cool to have it, doesn't really do much. The main reason I'm here is so that now that we're in the end game, I might as well refight the final boss with our new endgame folder. This is mostly me just sending up to the fact that this is something you do in basically every other BN game moving forward. There's a harder version of the final boss. And from what I'm aware, I think there's a version of Star Force Megaman and a harder version of the LifeAura you can fight, but I'm not certain if those are fan creations or not. If they were official, they were handed out in events like the other two, like the chips were, but I don't think they're real. I think they're just fan hacks that people created. Suppose they might be worth a shot if you're super interested, but I'm not. Battle Network 1 is not a tiresome game to play, but it's definitely a tiresome game to go for completion, even compared to the other games, because like I've stated several times in this post-game, the later games varied up their post-game. They had actual, like, mini arcs to their storylines and stuff. They had new areas to explore, new enemies into the post-game that were exclusive to the post-game, even. And there was more stuff to do without being overbearing sometimes. Sometimes it did. I'm looking at you, BN3. BN1's postgame, by and large, is just a grind with no real reward. You don't even get a second completion star on the title screen for getting a max library like you do in some of the other games. It's just, congrats, you did it. Cool. With that, though, I might as well show off one other thing while we're here, and that's the main reason I'm actually kind of prolonging this fight. I wanted to use the final program advance that we got in this fight, because it's the last thing that Star Force, or Operate Star Force adds. I might as well, you know? The only problem comes in when the chips decide to not show up. This can be a bit of a killer strat, or not a killer strat, this can be a strat killer for some of the later battle networks when you're facing super bosses. When the chips you want just decide to not show up until the very last ones of your chip folder. At points like this, some people playing the later games would probably either change their navis customization up, change their folder up to make it flow better or something. Personally speaking, I'm stubborn in that when I find a folder I like, I tend to stick with it. But its mileage may vary. Some people prefer to go for all program advances. Some people prefer to go just base damage on chips. It's really up to your preference, like I said. But this is why I said, by the way, that the B code is just really good in BN1, especially Operate Star Force, because there's so many really good chips that are coded B. Between all the really good sword chips, Proto Man's chips, Rogue chip, and the bomb chips especially can be really good, even if you don't do the program advance with them. B code's kind of busted, and I think that stays in some of the later games. I want to say BN2's B code's also really good. But here's the second new program advance, Double Hero 2. With that said, I probably should wait until it attacks, because otherwise it's just going to get absorbed by that LifeAura, and I'm not into that, thank you. Double Hero 2 is the weaker of the two program advances added for Operate Star Force, doing only 450 to every single panel in the enemy area. Still, I'd say it's a pretty fitting way to let the future decide the past a little bit here. And from there, we're just going to transition to end on the credits so I can talk about the game a bit more in depth from there. That's Operate Star Force in full. The post-game looked short, but trust me, that was a grind. It's one of those things where, because there's so little to do outside of the grind, editing only to when I get the things I need successfully just radically shortens it. I'd argue it's the worst post-game in the series, just in terms of what little there is to do because of that. The only stand-ups for what I would say are the worst outside of this are, in my case, Battle Network 3, because I think that game gets a little carried away with how much it wants you to do. Partially just because it was meant to be the last game in the series initially. And Battle Network 4, because of how it wants you to go about getting higher-level chips. So I'll talk more about that when we get back to that game, though, because I want to save my ranting about 4 for when we get to that again. But Operate Star Force on the whole, just due to the added bits and pieces at the end of the day, I'd say is the definitive version still of Battle Network 1. If you want to play it, I've been listing the place to get the patch down below. You'll have to get the game yourself some other way, because I'm not linking about that. That's how people get their channels taken down in some cases. It's good, but it's good for Battle Network 1, which I would still argue is worse than every other game besides potentially BN4 moving forward. It's a nice little experiment. I would have liked to see what they would have done for later games, but this game just didn't sell well. Even though it was released, I think, 8 years after the initial game, this was one of those games that I believe we have reports saying sold less than 10,000 copies in its first couple of weeks, which, given that it was releasing in Japan only at first, that's markedly low. Mega Man burnout was a very real thing in some regard in the late 2000s, early 2010s. Even though Capcom definitely abandoned the franchise in the wrong way between the Inafune departure and all the other stuff throughout the 2010s, we were also kind of getting tired of it looking back in some ways, weren't we? We got a lot of good games out of it, but I'd argue BN1's best trait is that it led to the other games. There's a solid foundation here, even with the Operate Star Force editions making it even better. But just play the sequels instead. I feel there's genuinely a much better time for you there. But yeah, that added a good 10 hours to my playtime or so. That was a long grind, about as long as the main game itself. It only gets longer from here, everyone, but at least it also gets more interesting. With that, the next time we revisit the Battle Network games, it's going to be as a celebratory series, which for those who aren't aware what that is, because you're new around here, essentially every now and then I take a game and I just upload a video of it every time we pass a certain subscriber threshold or video threshold. And that's partially because I don't want to dedicate full main LPs to redoing 6 games on top of probably finally throwing in network transmission in the Star Force games. So doing longer videos every now and then, I feel is just going to be a more approachable way to do the redos. Plus, it'll allow me to get through them technically faster. With that said, we're probably going to be seeing Battle Network 2 sooner than later, because I've been kind of holding off on doing celebratory videos until finishing this, just so I could hop right in and do a game that I love after a game I'm torn on, because there's a lot I like about BN1, but there's also a lot that just ages it. With that, though, this has been a long LP. I should call it a wrap here. I want to thank y'all for watching. Have a great night. Take care. And I'll see you guys next LP, whatever that may be. See you guys then. I was originally going to drop a hint about what's next, but I already have like the next 3 recorded, and I genuinely cannot remember what it is. Whoops. I swear I've been doing this for 10 years. Oh boy.